Hey everybody, Phil here. Welcome to This Is PLO, my comprehensive course on primarily heads-up PLO, but I would really say a lot of the things that we'll cover here apply to all types of PLO, and several of the things that I'll cover, especially in these first several videos, apply to all forms of poker. We're going to cover a lot of things that I believe are important, not only to developing a heads-up PLO strategy or a strategy in general, but as you'll soon see, in finding the most EV, given what you've learned about the game. So I want to start with the question of where our EV comes from. Now, since the advent of solvers, you can plug a game tree into a solver and it can tell you the EV of each line with each hand. And as such, you can compare the way that you played a hand to the EV of the line that the solver took, and you can see, oh, I lost 0.15 big blinds by making this bet. Some people believe that getting incrementally closer to optimal play than their opponent is going to lead to their EV edge. I don't believe that to be, I won't say I believe it to be false, but I don't believe it to be important or relevant. Particularly relevant. If I inch a little bit closer to optimal than my opponent, it's reasonably likely that I'll have a minuscule edge, but frankly, it's going to be very small. And secondly, it's actually quite possible that the way that I'm off from the solver and the way that my opponent is off from the solver interplay with each other in such a way that I'm actually losing EV, because my deviations are exploited by his deviations coincidentally. Nobody's making reads or anything. But all of that is kind of inconsequential once you get to a threshold of having a pretty good understanding about how to play as it relates to optimal play. The real EV comes from being able to think through, well, two things. A, being able to think through situations rather than relying on what you studied, relying on what you remember from a solver, being able to think through logically. This is the strange situation I'm in where, ranges have gotten really narrow because I bet 3-bet flop in a single raise pot, and now we get this strange turn. And obviously I've never studied this spot before because it's so bizarre, but I have to make a decision now. So being able to think through all the nuanced situations, being able to adjust to any bet sizing, being able to adjust to any kind of action sequence and board run out in such a way that you're getting a good idea of what you should do theoretically. And then next, a whole lot of the EV comes from high-level thought while you're playing. If you are able to think logically at a high level, and of course then there are skills that come into play like empathy, psychology, understanding your opponent, developing reads, acting on those reads. But once you have all those, you need to actually perform at a high level while you play. You need to be able to access all of that information and compute it and come up with strong adjustments and deviations from what you believe to be optimal. They're going to take advantage of the way your opponent's playing, or of a particular spot that you think your opponent is not going to understand well, or just a particular spot that you understand better than your opponent, and you're just simply trying to play it optimally. High-level thought and adjustments to opponents are where all the EV comes from. It does not come from inching closer to optimal play. So if big edges come from high-level thought, how do we access high-level thought more often? How do we access higher-level thought? There's a great book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, I know it's a great book because a lot of people I really respect have said so, but I actually haven't read it. I have, however, listened to him speak on the topic. And in that book, and in some of the talks I've listened to, he talks about System 1 and System 2 thinking. These are terms that he came up with, not particular real parts of the brain, but they describe the different types of thought that we have. So System 1 thinking is quick and intuitive. You're not actively thinking. So for example, walking does require thought. You need to actually do something. Your brain needs to operate for you to walk. but you don't actually ever really consciously think about it. You just know how to do it. Similarly, if I said, what's 2 plus 3? You know the answer to that, I hope. Reading, again, probably most of us here, reading it does not take active thought. You just see a word and you know what it says. System 2, this is more complex, sometimes computational, high-level thought. For example, complex problem solving. For some of you, if I gave you a problem of, 22 times 17, maybe there are some of you who can just know the answer because you memorized it, but for most of you, you'd have to go through some active thinking in your mind. If I were to ask you to, well, I don't know. It's actually going to be easier to get into examples for me from a poker perspective. And that's really what we're talking about here anyway. So let's do that. All right, so at the poker table, what are some examples of System 1 and System 2 thinking? The first one I'll give you is, what's your pre-flop open size? Heads up on the button. You should just have that. I mean, it's pot in almost every spot. Now, sometimes you might be playing at shorter stack depths and you might have some decisions to make, but realistically, you should know what your open size is in every single situation without having to think. If I were to say, okay, your hand is ace, king, jack, 5. The flop is ace, ace, 3. What is your hand right now? You should know right away that you have trips, top kicker. But at some point in your career, you didn't know that. At some point in your career, well, at some point in your life, you didn't even know that at all. And then at another point, it would take you conscious thought. It would be System 2 thought to think through, okay, so there are 2 aces out on the flop. I need to use 2 of my whole cards. So I want to use the ace and the king. And then 3 aces, that's called trips. At some point, you had to think through that. So that's proof that things from System 2 can move into System 1 thinking as you learn more. And that's, I guess, a preview of part of what I'm trying to help you accomplish, what I'm getting in this video and what I'm going to help you accomplish through this course. Similarly, clicking the mouse button or moving your mouse to the raise button and clicking it, or if you're playing live, reaching for chips, those are things that you probably don't have to think about at this point. Now, there's some other things that you may or may not have to think about. So, for example, we're playing heads up PLO. You 3-bet. The flop is Jack 10-7 rainbow. What c-bet sizings do you use? Sizing or sizings. For some of you watching, you might know the answer right away. You might not have to think. That might be System 1. For others of you, it's going to be System 2. You have to actively think that through, and you decide in the moment what sizings you're using. That's something that at the end of this course, I'm hoping all of you don't have to do. Similarly, in a single raise pot, you have an opportunity to c-bet on the flop. Hopefully by the end of this course, with 90% of your hands, maybe 80% of your hands, you have a very good idea of whether your hand is a bet or a check. And you also, of course, know what sizings you're using. There are always going to be some fringe hands that take some thought. But also, another thing that is, I guess, a preview of what I'm going to get at throughout this course is, with those fringe hands, it's better to be quick than right. With any of those fringe hands, if you bet or check, it's not that big a deal because they're, by definition, hands that have similar-ish EV in both lines. So getting to a point where you're not agonizing over that and you can do so in a way that involves kind of simplifying your strategy from what we've studied in a solver is going to save you a lot of mental bandwidth, allow you to play at a higher level. So my goal throughout this course is to get you better at poker. We're going to be focusing specifically on heads up PLO, but getting you better at heads up PLO, getting you better at poker is the goal. How do I believe you get better at poker? First and foremost, you improve your mind's ability to do System 2 thinking, to make complex calculations on the fly. So, in other words, maximizing your potential skill, maximizing your understanding of the game, your ability to think on the fly, and just a theoretical understanding. Number 2 is which is what I've just been talking about, I want you to move as much from System 2 into System 1 as you possibly can, so that your System 2 brain has much more room to operate. Whether you are one tabling live or 5 tabling online, there's only so much bandwidth that you have. You have a finite amount of time to make your decisions, and the more room you have to think at a high level, because you're not wasting your time thinking of things that should be easy for you, the better you're going to perform. Now, there are a lot of other benefits to this too. If you're not using as much bandwidth, generally you're going to reduce fatigue, which is always important, but especially important in heads-up play. You're going to play better when you're tilted because so many things are automatic. The fewer things that are automatic in your game, the more prone you are to making mistakes when you're tired, when you're upset, when you're distracted. And it's going to allow you to play more confidently. You know, there is a material impact, in my opinion, on how often throughout the course of an hour I feel confused at the table, on my ability to play well and have confidence that I'm playing well, to take decisive actions that I think are going to gain me EV. When I feel confused, oftentimes throughout a session, I'm not going to have that confidence to make the plays that I should find. So early in my challenges, I was still learning the fundamentals, and a lot of things that should have been System 1 were things that I was thinking of on the fly, System 2. And so I was essentially not hand reading at the beginning of my challenge, specifically against Benny Vidi, because I was trying so hard to remember how to execute the strategy that I was trying to execute, the default strategy I was trying to execute. And then, you know, throughout the challenge and future challenges, a lot more of those things became automatic. My performance got better and better, and I was able to actually hand read, actually make bigger adjustments than I was able to. At the beginning, I was mostly making kind of stat-based strategic adjustments, which, you know, I could study away from the table and then determine, okay, I want to probe more bluffs on the turn and then try to remember that in game. But I wasn't making in-game adjustments to the way that he was playing or the run out of a certain board, and what I knew about his ranges to that point. This period in the learning process is unfortunately inevitable. You can't sit here and study and study and study and then get to the table and not have these kind of growing pains. And I never recommend studying for a long period of time without playing, or playing for a long period of time without studying. I think that both feed off each other and your education compounds if you're doing both at once. But that's going to mean that, you know, as you're going through this course, as you're learning in whatever way you learn, studying in Vision or Monk or Solver or whatever tool you use, and you're playing, you're going to be confused sometimes. Your mind is going to be overloaded and you're going to make mistakes. It's just inevitable. And it just takes time. You know, it's kind of like stretching, where, you know, I could go stretch for an hour today and tomorrow I'm not going to be noticeably more flexible at all. But over time, I will get there. Now, I haven't done that either. I should probably start doing that after I film this. But yeah, it'll be there eventually. And just know going in that there are going to be these times where you're still overloaded, where you're trying to process all of the information that I'm sharing in this course, that you're learning from solvers. And it's not going to feel like it's clicking just yet. Eventually it will click. Okay, so what is this course going to look like? How am I going to try to accomplish getting you to playing higher level poker? We're going to start with some fundamental concepts right after this video. You could call it solver logic. My belief is it's not necessary to emulate a solver, and you'll see in many cases that I argue you should absolutely deviate from it. But it is necessary to understand why a solver does what it does. Otherwise, you might deviate in ways that are very expensive for you. Next, and this is the bulk of the course from a time perspective, we're going to look through every major spot that can come up in Heads Up PLO. And we'll do so with a lot of granularity, especially when it comes to board texture, because various board types play extremely differently, and I want to make sure that you're prepared for that. These sections are meant to accomplish a few things. firstly, to solidify your bet sizing strategy. As I've been talking about, you can't be spending mental energy guessing what sizes to use in every spot. So let's get that drilled into your head. Hopefully by the end of this course, C-bets in single raise pots, C-bets in 3-bet pots, turn C-bets in both spots, and river bets in almost all spots, as well as turn probe sizing in every spot, turn delay C-bet sizing in every spot. Those should all be automatic for you, and your mind will have more room to operate. Next is, we want to understand the solver strategy in each spot, and then seeing from that how I use that information to formulate my own strategy. You'll notice that in some spots I feel very strongly about the right way to play the majority of my range, whereas in other spots I feel it matters a lot less. You'll notice in some videos, I'll be very passionate about this is a big mistake, do this. In other videos, I'll say, you could do whatever here. And that's not because I don't know what to do there. It's because it really, in my opinion, doesn't matter what you do there as long as you have reasonable range construction. Next, in each of these spots, you'll get a glimpse into how and why I deviate from what a solver would do, both in terms of overall range construction decisions. So that's, taking what the solver does and deciding that I want to do something differently and executing that. And then also due to hand reading, taking advantage of the way that I think opponents play certain spots and making adjustments based on that in game. I also intend for these sections to be highly rewatchable. Anytime you find yourself confused in a certain spot, just go back to that very specific spot and watch those 2 to 4 videos that I talk about that topic in. There are so many times throughout my challenges where I would go back and practice, for example, facing turn C bets in 3-bet pots on flush boards. Again and again and again, because I felt I was rusty there. You can't keep all of it in your mind all the time, and sometimes you need to go back and look at specific spots. So definitely use this as a resource, not just when you watch it one time through and be done with it, but come back to these individual sections whenever you feel you need to. I also intend for them to be skippable. If you've got flop C-bet strategies down in single raise pots and you just want to get onto the stuff that is more valuable to you now, so that you can maximize your EV sooner, by all means, go for it. I would recommend you go back and watch them later, because sometimes I will share some things that you may not have implemented in your game, and you can agree or disagree and decide to implement them or not. But absolutely feel like you can skip sections if you want to. And I think after you watch, a few of them, you'll get an idea of how they work, how each section works. I first cover a spot in Vision or occasionally in Munker Solver. Then we go into hand examples from my challenges, and I talk you through how I think through the spots and my overall strategy. So I absolutely trust you to make the decisions that you need to there with that information. We all have spots where we just feel like we're being run over, whether it's in a 25,000 hand challenge against one specific opponent, or in just the course of day-to-day play. We all have times when we're like, man, I really feel like I'm overfolding to turn C-bets on flush boards. That's what these videos are designed for. Just go back to that specific section and rewatch. And I hope that you find that very helpful. Third, we're going to focus on hand reading. And this is, in my opinion, where all of the real money is made in poker. And I think that, honestly, I think this is something that a lot of more solver-focused players don't fully understand. But realistically, maybe it's me that's wrong. And I don't know. I'll keep playing them and find out. I really can't emphasize this enough. Even the very best players in the world have spots where they way over bluff, way under bluff, way over fold, way under fold. The most extreme cases obviously come up rarely when you're playing elite players, but they do come up, and capitalizing on them is huge for your win rate. It's massive for your win rate. In order to take advantage, though, you're going to need your brain's bandwidth available to do some complex problem solving, but you also need to be capable of doing that problem solving. That's what this section is for. This section, I'm going to talk you through how I do that problem solving and the types of thought processes you can apply when you're in game. This is where most of your money will be made, but you won't truly be able to execute it well until much of your game is automated. So that's why I've put the videos in this order, even though I think that the hand reading is the most important part of this course. It's going to be actually very few videos compared to the overall course, because you can't get there, you can't execute it until you've got everything else down. You can't be trying to figure out what bet sizes you want to have for turn C bets in single raise pots when the board pairs after a monotone flop. Those decisions have to become automatic for you. And so that's first and foremost the goal of this course. Then lastly, I'll do some session reviews from my heads up challenges. We'll look at how I progressed as a player throughout them and how I adjusted to each opponent. So we'll get to see the concepts that I cover in this course in practice in real time. Hopefully you're excited about diving in and covering all these areas. It is going to be a lot of videos, a lot of hours of your time. But I think for all the reasons I mentioned, it's necessary to maxing your EV. I know I'm excited to cover all these topics and to share with you what I've learned about the game. So without further ado, I will see you in the next video. Let's do it.